This is GB in America. Right, let's have a chat to Kelly Jane Torrance. She's the editor for the New York Post, and she oversees the New York Post swing state election coverage. And she's also a writer. There's a lot going on, Kelly. You are a very talented woman. Right, Kelly, so talk to me. So we're going to be hearing the debate between Kamala Harris and also Donald Trump. What are the key things that we need to be looking out for in that debate?
Well, thanks for having me on. It's great to be here. One interesting thing I think about this debate is the format. Now, there's no opening statements. It's going straight to the questions, and each candidate has 2 minutes to respond, and then the opponent can have a chance to respond. Now, only moderators can ask questions. The candidates can't ask each other questions. And one of the interesting things is there was a little bit of an argument over whether the microphone should be muted. The original rules agreed to, of course, when Joe Biden was going to be the debater against Donald Trump, was the microphones would be muted like they were in that first debate. So they can't talk over each other. Well, Kamala Harris actually wanted them unmuted. She wanted to have Trump be able to talk over her, probably because that would make him look as good. And they're entering from opposite sides of the stage, which is also interesting. We'll recall when Trump debated Hillary Clinton in 2016, there was one debate at which he just was looming over her as she was answering questions. So they're going to keep them very separate this time. ABC's doing its best to make this a civil debate about the issues. Whether that will actually happen, we'll see tonight.
Because ABC had been previously, Trump had previously accused them of being quite biased, so he wasn't really wanting to debate with them, and some of their commentators had said some quite awful things about him, so understandably. Now let's talk about Kamala Harris. What does she need to do to convince the American electorate that she is worthy of president?
Well, I think one of her biggest challenges is separating herself from the administration in which she serves as vice president. A lot of voters are very unhappy with Joe Biden's tenure so far. And Kamala Harris, of course, has been a big part of that. So inflation, world wars, there's so many, the border, of course, that one, Harris is directly involved, as Biden named her early on in March of his first year in office, named her the border czar. Well, how has that turned out? You have rampant illegal immigration that's affecting not just border states, but all states. Here in New York City, I can tell you it's certainly been an issue as it's draining public funds. So I think her biggest challenge is to say, what would she do differently? And she only released a bit of policy on her website just yesterday, and it's pretty vague. So we're waiting to see what specifics she'll have that will distinguish her and explain how she'll fix some of what her boss made problems.
She'll also, what do you think she can talk about as to what her skills are that she can actually bring to the table?
Well, I think the number one thing that she'll discuss or put forward as a huge skill is her work as a prosecutor. She was Attorney General of California, that's the nation's top law enforcement official. So she certainly, it's not often that you hear a Democratic candidate, especially a progressive one, talking about being the candidate of law and order. But that's what Kamala Harris has been doing. And she'll certainly use that and say that, she's used to tough cases. She gets it done. She's for public safety. She's for law-abiding people. But again, she's, of course, going to face some. I'm certain the moderators will ask her about some of her past positions, for example, on illegal immigrants. So that's a skill she's going to really put forward. And in fact, her time in the courtroom might help her as a debater.
Potentially, but we've got a Prime Minister who is of a similar ilk, and he's just let out a lot of people from jail who shouldn't really be coming out. What about Donald Trump then? What are the things that Donald Trump will need to do, or perhaps not do, to try and convince the American electorate?
Yeah, he's going to have a tough challenge here because, as I said, he had some issues debating Hillary Clinton. It seemed like he wasn't treating a woman with enough respect. Now you have him debating a black woman. The stakes are even higher, especially amongst the media and the chattering class. They'll be looking for any disrespect that he gives Kamala. So, but the biggest thing for him is he's got to stay on message. Don't resort to the personal attacks. They don't really play well with voters, especially undecided voters, of which there are actually quite a few left, especially in those all too important swing states. He needs to stick to his message, explain to voters how he will reverse the last 4 years of what he calls an intense decline. He's got to fix the border. He's got to roll back inflation. Energy production, that's another one he's big on talking about. And of course, that plays well in Pennsylvania, which is a big fracking state. So his crucial thing is to stay on message. And I know he can do it. He gave a talk last week to the Economic Club of New York, and he actually just read off the teleprompter. He didn't go on those usual sort of, asides and rants that he tends to do. So it's possible for him to do it. Will he do it again? We'll find out tonight.
Well, maybe the mics will be muted, which will probably be in his best interest so that he doesn't talk over Kamala and start calling her names, because nobody likes to hear that. As soon as you start calling people names, then you are effectively losing the argument, and that no one wants a loser to lead the country. What are his strengths that he can bring to the table?
Well, he's got his record to run on, his 4 years in office from 2017 on. And those were pretty good years in many ways. When he left office, his approval ratings obviously were terrible. But looking back now, you ask voters, and they remember those years much more fondly because of the contrast in many ways with this last 4 years under Biden. So he can talk about how well the economy did under him. He can talk about how, America was under record energy production. And of course, Biden has, finally reached that point, just a little less. But he can talk about where it would be millions more barrels a day if Trump policies held. He can talk about how the world was safer when he was president. You didn't have a land war in Europe. You didn't have such a big conflict in Israel. So he's got a pretty good record to run on. And I think his skills are really reaching the average person, the average voter. That's one reason he was so successful in 2016 is he really, he was almost heartfelt the way he talks to people. And if he can, do that through a television screen rather than, one of his big rallies, I think he can do an excellent job. And he's got one advantage, by the way. He won a coin toss. And so he got to choose when to give his closing statement, and he chose to give it last. So each candidate has 2 minutes for closing statements. And so he will have the last word of the evening.
So who's your money on to win this debate?
It's a tough question, Nana, but I'm going to go with Donald Trump. I could be wrong, but I think he's got substance on his side if he can stick to it. Kamala Harris is going to have a difficult time because she's really, defending positions of the opposite of what she had 4 years ago. She said back 4 years ago, I would ban fracking. Now she's trying to claim she wouldn't. So she's got a lot of, landmines to avoid. And Donald Trump's landmines really would be just of his own making on the whole. So I think he has the greater chance of success. Again, he's got to stick to that message.
He has to stick to the message. Well, listen, Kelly Jane Torrance, thank you very much. Really good to talk to you. That is Kelly Jane Torrance. She's the editor for the New York Post, and she oversees the New York Post swing state election coverage. She's also a writer, critic and commentator. Thank you. This is GB in America. I'm Nana Akua. If you want to find out more, go to gbnews.com/America.